The world remembers many wars, but some stories never made it into books, never reached classrooms, never became part of history. This is the story of a war that left behind no survivors, no victors, no monuments, only the memory of those whose courage outlived their final breath. It began in a valley forgotten by time, a place where mountains stood like silent witnesses, and the cold winds carried whispers of an approaching storm. The soldiers stationed there knew they had been sent to a front that the world considered insignificant, a place no one cared about, yet every man among them understood one truth. Battles become legendary not because of where they happen, but because of who fights them. In the final days, the valley was drowning in fog, sunlight unable to break through the thick gray walls that wrapped the land like a shroud. Captain Elias Ward, a man whose eyes carried more stories than his voice ever did, stood on the ridge and watched the silence. He felt it, the kind of silence that comes before destruction, a silence heavy enough to crush the heart. His men trusted him, not because he was fearless, but because he dared to lead even when fear sat inside him like a shadow. With him were 26 soldiers, some just boys, some seasoned fighters, all bound by the same duty. They had been ordered to hold the valley for 48 hours, no reinforcements, no backup, no escape route. Just endurance against an enemy whose strength outnumbered them 10-1. Night fell with an uneasy calm. Fires flickered in the trenches as the men huddled together, sharing the last of their supplies. Private Aaron Hale, the youngest of them, silently carved his sister's name into a bullet. He once said he did it to remind himself that he wasn't fighting to take lives, but to protect the people who gave him a reason to live. Next to him sat Jonas Reed, a man known for joking even in the darkest hours, but that night even his smile couldn't survive. He cleaned his rifle slowly, as if preparing for something he already knew he wouldn't walk away from. Just after midnight, the valley trembled. The ground shook as tanks rolled in from the north, their engines growling like beasts hungry for destruction. Elias gave the signal. No shouting, no chaos, only quiet movements practiced through countless drills. In war, silence can be louder than gunfire. The first blast lit up the sky like a false sunrise. The men rose from their trenches, their silhouettes framed against flames, dust, and collapsing earth. They fought with everything they had: bullets, blades, bare hands when ammunition ran dry. Each moment stretched like eternity, each heartbeat carrying the weight of survival and sacrifice. Hours slipped by like seconds. Smoke choked the air. The enemy's numbers seemed endless. When Private Hale fell, he didn't cry out. He simply looked at the sky, as if searching for a memory worth holding on to. Jonas Reed dragged 2 wounded soldiers to safety before a shell struck the bunker he stood near. Captain Elias, bleeding from his shoulder, continued to shout commands through the roar of artillery, guiding his men with the last fragments of strength he possessed. His voice echoed through the destruction, firm, steady, unbroken. By dawn, only 5 remained standing. The valley was a graveyard of metal and fire, the mountains scarred with black smoke rising like funeral prayers. The men knew they could not win, but they refused to surrender. Real heroes are not the ones who survive the longest. They are the ones who stand even when the ground beneath them is collapsing. Elias gathered the last fighters and made a final stand near the fallen flagpole. The enemy surrounded them, closing in like a tightening storm, yet the men lifted their weapons defiantly, bravely, silently. They held the valley until the last heartbeat faded. When the world learned of the battle weeks later, there was nothing left, not a trench, not a bunker, not even the bodies of the men who fought there. The entire valley had been swallowed by the force of the explosions, erased from the map as if it had never existed. But legends don't need monuments. They survive in stories whispered by those who still believe in courage. Historians later called it the war no one survived, but those who understood sacrifice knew the truth. Survival is not only measured by breathing. Sometimes, survival is leaving behind a legacy that inspires generations. Today, when the cold winds sweep across forgotten lands, they carry the silent footsteps of Captain Elias and his men. They were not fighting for medals or recognition. They fought because someone had to stand their ground when the world looked away, and though none of them returned home, their bravery echoed far beyond the valley that consumed them. These were the real heroes, men who fought in a war no one survived, yet whose courage will never die.